I had always thought of my home as a sanctuary, a place where love and trust flourished. But that evening, as I approached the front door, a sense of unease washed over me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the street, and I felt an inexplicable chill in the air. Little did I know, my life was about to shatter into a million pieces. As I stepped inside, the familiar scent of vanilla and lavender greeted me. It was comforting, yet something felt off. I called out for Emily, expecting her to respond with her usual warmth. Instead, silence enveloped me. My heart raced as I moved through the dimly lit hallway, each step echoing my growing anxiety. Then, I heard it, a soft laugh, melodic and intimate. It came from our bedroom. I froze, my breath hitching in my throat. A wave of dread washed over me. I approached the door, my hand trembling as I reached for the knob. I hesitated, a part of me hoping that I was just imagining things. But deep down, I knew I had to see for myself. I pushed the door open, and what I saw made my heart plummet. There, in the middle of our bed, was Emily, tangled in the sheets with another man. His name was James River, a musician I had heard about but never met. He was everything I wasn't: charismatic, carefree, and undeniably charming. The sight of them together felt like a punch to the gut, knocking the wind out of me. "Michael!" Emily exclaimed, her eyes widening in shock. But it was too late for apologies or explanations. The betrayal hung thick in the air like a suffocating fog. I felt a surge of emotions: anger, heartbreak, and an overwhelming sense of loss. My mind raced as I tried to process the reality of what I was witnessing. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice cracking with rage. James scrambled to pull on his clothes, but I barely noticed him. My focus was solely on Emily, the woman I had loved and trusted. "How could you do this to me?" Tears welled in her eyes, but I couldn't muster any sympathy. The warmth I once felt for her was replaced by a cold, hard fury. I turned on my heel and stormed out of the room, my heart pounding in my chest. I needed air, space, and time to think. As I stepped outside, the cool night air hit me like a slap. I wandered aimlessly through the streets of New York, each step echoing the chaos in my mind. I felt lost, betrayed, and utterly alone. The city, once vibrant and full of life, now felt like a desolate landscape. In that moment of despair, a dark thought crept into my mind. I could feel the embers of revenge igniting within me. I would not let this betrayal go unanswered. I would make them pay for the pain they had caused me. With newfound determination, I began to formulate a plan. I would infiltrate James's world, become a part of his life, and turn the tables on him. I would make him regret ever crossing paths with me. Little did I know, this path would lead me to unexpected connections and revelations that would change everything. As I walked through the city, the lights twinkling like stars above me, I realized that this was just the beginning. My life was about to take a turn I never could have anticipated. The journey of revenge was just starting, and I was ready to embrace it. The days that followed that fateful night felt like an endless spiral into darkness. Each morning I woke up, the reality of Emily's betrayal crashed over me like a tidal wave, pulling me deeper into a sea of despair. I had always prided myself on being a good husband, a supportive partner. But now, I felt like a fool, a mere shadow of the man I once was. I spent hours replaying memories in my mind: our first date, the laughter we shared, the quiet evenings spent cuddled on the couch. Those moments, once filled with warmth and joy, now felt tainted. I could no longer look at photographs without feeling a sharp pang of betrayal. The smiles that once radiated happiness now seemed like cruel reminders of my naivety. Every corner of our apartment echoed with the ghosts of our past. I would catch myself staring at her favorite mug in the kitchen. The one she always used for her morning coffee. It felt like a dagger to my heart. How could she betray me so easily? How could she share those intimate moments with another man, as if our love meant nothing? I tried to distract myself with work, pouring all my energy into my architectural projects. But even my passion felt hollow. I would sit at my desk, sketches scattered around me, but my mind was elsewhere, lost in thoughts of Emily and James. I couldn't shake the image of them together, laughing and sharing secrets in the very space I had once considered sacred. My colleagues noticed my distraction. They would throw concerned glances my way, but I brushed them off. I didn't want their pity. I didn't want to talk about it. I was a man who had always been in control, but now I felt like a puppet with its strings cut, flailing helplessly in the wind. One evening, I found myself standing in front of a mirror, staring at my reflection. The man looking back at me was a stranger. My eyes were sunken, the stubble on my face unshaven for days. I barely recognized myself. I had lost weight, and the confident demeanor I once carried had been replaced by a heavy cloak of self-doubt. "Who are you?" I muttered to myself, frustration bubbling to the surface. "You're not the man she fell in love with." The realization hit me like a ton of bricks. I had allowed her betrayal to strip me of my self-worth. I was no longer the ambitious architect with dreams and aspirations. I had become a mere victim of circumstance, wallowing in self-pity. But deep down, a flicker of anger ignited within me. I refused to let her actions define me. I would not be the broken man she had turned me into. I needed to reclaim my sense of self, to rise from the ashes of this betrayal. That night, I made a decision. I would channel my pain into something productive. I would train, learn, and prepare myself for the next phase of my life. I would become someone who could stand tall. Someone who could confront James and Emily without flinching. As I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt a surge of determination. I would not remain a victim. I would transform my heartbreak into strength. I would become a force to be reckoned with, and I would make them both understand the consequences of their actions. Tomorrow would be the first step in my journey of reclaiming my life. I would no longer allow their betrayal to dictate my worth. I would rise, stronger and more resolute than ever before. As the days passed, my anger towards Emily and James only grew stronger. The initial shock had given way to a burning desire for retribution. I couldn't shake the feeling of betrayal, the way they had shattered the trust I had placed in them. One night, as I lay awake staring at the ceiling, a plan began to form in my mind. It was a bold, daring idea, but it was the only way I could think of to get back at them. I would infiltrate James's world, become a part of his life, and then turn the tables on him. I would make him regret ever crossing paths with me. The next day, I set my plan in motion. I began researching James, learning everything I could about him and his music. I discovered that he was a talented musician, with a recording studio in the heart of the city. It was the perfect opportunity to get close to him. With newfound determination, I started training. I hit the gym, pushing myself to the limit, sculpting my body into a lean, muscular frame. I wanted to be in peak physical condition, ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. I also brushed up on my musical knowledge, studying the latest trends and techniques in the industry. As I transformed myself, I couldn't help but feel a sense of power. I was no longer the broken man I had been just a few weeks ago. I was a force to be reckoned with, a man on a mission. And nothing was going to stand in my way. One day, I dressed in my best suit and headed to James's studio. I had crafted a resume that highlighted my musical knowledge and experience. Even though I had none, I was confident in my ability to fake it until I made it. When I arrived at the studio, I was greeted by a receptionist who looked at me with a mix of curiosity and suspicion. "Can I help you?" she asked, her voice tinged with skepticism. "Yes, I'm here to apply for the assistant position," I replied, my voice steady and confident. "My name is Michael, and I'm a big fan of James's work." The receptionist eyed me for a moment, then nodded. "Wait here, I'll let him know you're here." As I waited, my heart pounded in my chest. This was it, the moment of truth. If I could land this job, I would be one step closer to getting my revenge. I took a deep breath, trying to calm my nerves. A few minutes later, the receptionist returned. "James will see you now," she said, gesturing towards a door at the back of the studio. I took another deep breath and stepped forward, ready to face my enemy head-on. This was the beginning of my journey towards retribution, and I was determined to see it through to the end. As I embarked on my mission to infiltrate James's world, I knew I needed to be at the top of my game. The physical transformation I had undergone was only half the battle. I needed to be mentally prepared as well, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. That's when I remembered my old friend, David. We had been close since college, bonding over our shared passion for music and architecture. David had always been the more outgoing of the two of us, with a knack for making friends and navigating social situations. I reached out to David, explaining my plan and asking for his help. To my surprise, he didn't hesitate. "Of course, man," he said, his voice filled with enthusiasm. "I'm in. What do you need?" David became my sounding board, offering advice and guidance as I prepared for my new role as James's assistant. He helped me brush up on my musical knowledge, quizzing me on the latest trends and techniques. We spent hours listening to James's music, analyzing his style and approach. But David's support went beyond just the practical aspects of the job. He was a constant source of encouragement, reminding me that I was strong, capable, and worthy of happiness. "You've got this, Michael," he would say, clapping me on the back. "Don't let those two bring you down." As the days passed, I could feel myself growing more confident, more sure of myself. The self-doubt that had plagued me in the aftermath of Emily's betrayal began to fade, replaced by a steely determination. I was ready to take on the world, and no one was going to stand in my way. One evening, as David and I were grabbing dinner at our favorite diner, he turned to me with a serious expression. "You know, man, this whole revenge thing, it's not going to be easy. Are you sure you're ready for it?" I paused, considering his words. "I have to be, David," I replied, my voice low but resolute. "I can't just sit back and let them get away with what they did. I need to fight back, to show them that I'm not going to be a victim." David nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "I get it, man. Just promise me you'll be careful, okay? Don't let this consume you. Remember who you are, and what you're fighting for." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I promise," I said, my voice thick with emotion. "And thanks, David, for everything." As I lay in bed that night, staring up at the ceiling, I felt a sense of peace wash over me. I knew that the road ahead would be tough, filled with challenges and obstacles. But with David by my side, and my own inner strength to guide me, I was ready to face whatever came my way. Tomorrow, I would take the next step in my journey towards retribution. I would walk through the doors of James's studio, head held high, ready to take on the world. And nothing was going to stop me. The day had finally arrived. I stood outside the recording studio, my heart racing with a mix of excitement and anxiety. This was it, the moment I had been preparing for. I took a deep breath, straightened my tie, and pushed open the door. The studio was alive with energy. Musicians were scattered around, tuning their instruments and discussing arrangements. The walls were adorned with gold records and posters of legendary artists, a testament to the creative genius that had flourished within these four walls. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I stepped inside, ready to play my part in this world. As I made my way to the front desk, the receptionist greeted me with a warm smile. "You must be Michael. James is expecting you," she said, gesturing towards an open door at the back of the studio. My stomach churned with anticipation. I walked through the doorway and found myself in a spacious room filled with instruments and sound equipment. In the center stood James, his back to me as he fiddled with a guitar. He had an easy confidence about him, the kind of charisma that drew people in. I had imagined him to be a cocky rock star, but as I watched him, I realized there was something more to him. "Hey there," he said, turning around and flashing a bright smile. "You must be the new assistant. I'm James." His voice was warm and inviting, completely disarming me. "Yeah, I'm Michael. Thanks for having me," I replied, forcing a smile despite the turmoil churning inside me. James gestured for me to come closer. "I'm glad you're here. We're working on a new track, and I could use an extra pair of hands. Have you had any experience in a studio before?" I hesitated, recalling my lack of experience. "Not really, but I'm a fast learner," I said, trying to sound confident. He nodded, his eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. "That's what I like to hear. Let's dive in. I'll show you the ropes." As the day progressed, I found myself immersed in the world of music. James was passionate about his craft, and it was infectious. He explained the intricacies of sound mixing and the importance of each instrument in a track. I watched him work, captivated by his talent and dedication. We took breaks between recording sessions, and during those moments, we began to talk. I learned that James had grown up in a small town, dreaming of making it big in the music industry. He shared stories of his struggles, the countless auditions that had ended in rejection, and the moments of doubt that had almost made him give up. "Music is everything to me," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "It's how I express myself, how I connect with the world. I can't imagine doing anything else." As he spoke, I felt a strange sense of camaraderie forming between us. He was not just a musician, he was a man with dreams, fears, and vulnerabilities. The anger I had felt towards him began to wane, replaced by a growing respect for his passion and determination. But I quickly reminded myself of why I was there. I had a mission, a purpose that was far from over. I couldn't let my feelings cloud my judgment. I needed to stay focused. As the day came to an end, James clapped me on the back. "You did great today, Michael. I'm glad to have you on the team. Let's do this again tomorrow?" I nodded, forcing a smile. "Absolutely. I'm looking forward to it." As I left the studio that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was going to be more complicated than I had anticipated. I had come to destroy him, but I was beginning to see him as a person rather than just the man who had taken my wife. This was going to be a delicate balancing act, and I needed to tread carefully. The lines between revenge and friendship were starting to blur, and I wasn't sure how I felt about it. The next morning, I arrived at the studio with a mix of excitement and trepidation. As I stepped inside, the familiar hum of creativity enveloped me. Musicians were tuning their instruments, and the sound of laughter echoed down the hall. I felt a rush of adrenaline as I prepared to dive deeper into this new world. James greeted me with a wide smile. "Hey, Michael, ready for another day of music magic?" His enthusiasm was contagious, and I found myself smiling back, despite the underlying tension of my secret mission. "Absolutely," I replied, eager to immerse myself in the work ahead. The day began with a recording session for a new track. James explained the process, and I quickly learned the ropes. I helped set up microphones, adjusted sound levels, and organized the instruments. The atmosphere was electric, and I felt a sense of belonging that I hadn't experienced in a long time. As the session progressed, I watched James work his magic. He was a natural leader, guiding the musicians with a blend of confidence and humility. He encouraged them to express their ideas, fostering a collaborative environment that allowed creativity to flourish. I was in awe of how he brought out the best in everyone around him. "All right, let's take it from the top," James called out, and the musicians launched into the melody. The sound washed over me, vibrant. I felt the rhythm pulse through my veins, igniting a passion I hadn't realized was dormant within me. During breaks, James and I would chat about music, sharing our favorite artists and discussing the latest trends. I found myself opening up to him, sharing my dreams and aspirations. He listened intently, offering encouragement and advice. It was refreshing to connect with someone who genuinely cared about my thoughts and feelings. "Music is about connection," he said one afternoon as we sat in the lounge, sipping coffee. "It's how we communicate our experiences, our emotions. It's powerful." His words resonated with me, and I began to see music in a new light. It wasn't just a tool for revenge, it was a form of expression. A way to heal. I realized that I had been so focused on my plan that I had overlooked the beauty of the art itself. As the weeks passed, I became more involved in the studio. I learned how to operate the soundboard, assist with mixing, and even contribute ideas to the songs we were creating. Each day was a new adventure, filled with challenges and triumphs. I felt myself growing, both personally and professionally. But with each passing moment, the conflict within me deepened. I had come to the studio to destroy James. Yet I found myself drawn to him as a friend. He was not the enemy I had envisioned. He was a talented artist, a dedicated musician, and a genuinely good person. One evening, as we wrapped up a long recording session, James turned to me with a grin. "You've become an integral part of this team, Michael. I couldn't have asked for a better assistant." His words struck a chord within me. I had come to the studio seeking revenge, but now I was beginning to feel a sense of loyalty towards him and the work we were doing together. The lines between right and wrong were becoming increasingly blurred, and I was left questioning my original intentions. As I left the studio that night, I felt a mixture of confusion and exhilaration. I was no longer just an outsider, I was part of something bigger, something beautiful. And yet, the shadow of revenge still loomed over me, a constant reminder of the pain that had brought me here in the first place. I knew I had to make a choice soon. Would I continue down this path of vengeance? Or would I allow myself to embrace the new connections I was forming? The answer was becoming increasingly complicated, and I was left wondering where my journey would ultimately lead me. As the weeks rolled on, the initial fire of my revenge plan began to flicker and dim, replaced by something I hadn't anticipated, an unexpected camaraderie with James. Each day in the studio brought new challenges, but it also brought moments of genuine connection that I couldn't ignore. One afternoon, as we took a break from recording, James leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his tousled hair. "You know, it's not always easy, this music thing," he said, his voice tinged with vulnerability. "There are days when I wonder if it's all worth it. I looked at him, surprised by his openness. What do you mean? I asked, genuinely curious. He sighed, staring out the window at the bustling city below. I've been chasing this dream for so long, and sometimes it feels like I'm just spinning my wheels. The pressure to create something perfect can be overwhelming. I worry that I'll never live up to the expectations, my own and everyone else's. His honesty struck a chord within me. I had always seen him as the confident musician, the man who had it all figured out. But here he was, sharing his insecurities with me, and I felt a strange sense of kinship. I can relate to that, I admitted, my voice softer than usual. In architecture, there's always this pressure to innovate, to create something that will leave a mark. It can be daunting. James turned to me, his eyes brightening with interest. Really? I never knew you felt that way. What do you do when that pressure gets to you? I thought for a moment. I try to remind myself why I started in the first place. It's about passion, not perfection. But it's hard to keep that perspective sometimes. He nodded, and I could see the wheels turning in his mind. Maybe we should remind each other of that. We can be each other's support system through this crazy journey. The suggestion caught me off guard, but I found myself smiling. I'd like that. As the days turned into weeks, our conversations deepened. We shared our dreams, our fears, and our aspirations. James opened up about his childhood, the struggles he faced growing up in a small town, and the sacrifices he had made to pursue his passion for music. I found myself captivated by his story, realizing that he was not just a musician but a person with a rich tapestry of experiences. And as I learned more about him, I felt my initial animosity begin to fade. I started to see him not as the man who had taken my wife, but as a complex individual navigating his challenges. He was passionate, driven, and incredibly talented, and I couldn't help but admire him. One evening, as we wrapped up a particularly long recording session, James turned to me with a grin. You know, I couldn't have done this without you. You've helped me push through some tough spots. Thanks, man. That means a lot, I replied, feeling a warmth spread through me. But as I walked home that night, I couldn't shake the confusion brewing inside me. I had come to the studio with a singular purpose, to enact my revenge. Yet, here I was, forming a bond with the very person I had intended to destroy. It felt like a betrayal of my mission, but I couldn't deny the connection we had forged. I began to question everything. Was I willing to go through with my plan? Did I want to hurt someone who had become a friend? The lines between right and wrong were becoming increasingly blurred, and I was left grappling with my own emotions. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I felt a mix of excitement and dread. I was caught in a web of conflicting feelings, and I knew that I had to confront them soon. The path I was on was no longer clear, and I had to decide whether to embrace this unexpected friendship or cling to the anger that had brought me here in the first place. It was a typical day in the studio, filled with the usual hustle and bustle of musicians and sound engineers collaborating on new tracks. The atmosphere was electric, and I found myself increasingly immersed in the creative process. But beneath the surface, I was grappling with a growing complexity of emotions regarding my relationship with James and the situation with Emily. During a break, James and I settled into the lounge, the remnants of our lunch scattered across the table. As we chatted about music and upcoming projects, I sensed a shift in the conversation. James looked contemplative, his brow furrowed as if he was wrestling with something deep within. "Can I ask you something personal?" he said, his tone serious. "Sure, what's on your mind?" I replied, intrigued. He hesitated for a moment, then took a deep breath. "I know things are complicated between you and Emily. I've been thinking about it a lot lately. I didn't mean for it to happen, you know? I never intended to come between you two." His words caught me off guard. I had expected him to be defensive, to brush off any responsibility for the situation. But here he was, acknowledging the complexity of our circumstances. "I appreciate you saying that," I replied, my voice steady. "But it doesn't change what happened." James nodded, his expression earnest. "I get that, but I want you to know that it wasn't just a fling for me. I care about her. I didn't plan on falling for her, but it just happened." I felt a surge of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to lash out, to remind him of the pain he had caused me. But another part of me, the part that had come to understand him as a person, felt a strange sense of empathy. "I can see that," I said slowly. "Emily is an incredible person. I get why you'd be drawn to her." James looked relieved, as if he had been waiting for my reaction. "I just want to be honest with you. I never wanted to hurt you. I know how much you loved her, and I respect that. It's just complicated. The conversation hung in the air, heavy with unspoken feelings. I found myself reflecting on my own emotions. I had spent so much time harboring anger and resentment towards him, but now, as he spoke, I began to see the situation through his eyes. He was not just a rival, he was a man grappling with his feelings and the consequences of his actions. I've been angry, I admitted, my voice softer. Angry at both of you. But I also realized that life isn't black and white. People make mistakes, and feelings can be messy. James nodded, his expression thoughtful. Exactly. I didn't mean to hurt you, but I can't change how I feel about her. It's just real. As I listened to him, I felt the weight of my hatred begin to lift. I could see the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability in his words. It was a stark contrast to the image I had constructed in my mind of him as a heartless villain. He was human, just like me, navigating a complicated emotional landscape. I appreciate your honesty, James, I said, feeling a sense of relief wash over me. I've been struggling with my feelings, too. It's hard to reconcile everything that's happened. He smiled, a genuine warmth in his expression. I think it's important to talk about it. Relationships are complicated, and it's okay to feel conflicted. Just know that I'm not trying to take anything away from you. I respect what you had with her. At that moment, I realized that my hatred was being replaced by understanding. I had come to the studio to enact revenge, but now I found myself empathizing with the man I had once seen as my enemy. It was a profound shift, and I knew that it would change the course of my journey. As we continued to talk, I felt a bond forming between us, one built on honesty and shared experiences. I was no longer just a man seeking revenge, I was a person navigating the complexities of love and loss. And in that shared understanding, I found a glimmer of hope for my healing. As I walked home from the studio that evening, my mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. The conversation with James had shaken me to my core, forcing me to confront the very foundations of my revenge plan. I had come to the studio with the singular purpose of destroying him, of making him pay for the pain he had caused me. But now, as I reflected on our discussion, I realized that my hatred had been replaced by something else entirely, understanding. I thought back to the man I had been just a few months ago, consumed by anger and a thirst for vengeance. I had been so focused on making James and Emily suffer that I had lost sight of myself, of the person I truly wanted to be. But now, as I walked the familiar streets of New York, I felt a shift within me. The weight of my hatred was lifting, replaced by a newfound clarity. As I approached my apartment, I paused, staring up at the building that had once been my sanctuary. It was here that I discovered the betrayal that had set me on this path of revenge. But now, as I stood before it, I realized that I no longer wanted to be defined by that moment. I wanted to move forward, to embrace a future that wasn't tainted by the past. With a deep breath, I stepped inside, my mind made up. I knew what I had to do. The next morning, I arrived at the studio with a renewed sense of purpose. As I made my way to the lounge, I spotted James, already sipping his coffee and poring over a stack of sheet music. "Hey, man," I said, my voice steady. "Can we talk?" James looked up, his expression curious. "Of course. What's up?" I took a seat across from him, my heart pounding in my chest. "I've been doing a lot of thinking about our conversation yesterday. About everything that's happened." He nodded, his eyes filled with understanding. "Me too. It's been weighing on me, you know?" "I know," I replied. "And I want you to know that I appreciate your honesty. It means a lot to me." James smiled, a hint of relief in his expression. "I'm glad you feel that way. I never wanted to hurt you, Michael. I hope you know that." I took a deep breath, steeling myself for what I was about to say. "I believe you. And I want you to know that I'm not going to try to get back at you. I'm done with the revenge plan." James's eyes widened in surprise. "Really? But I thought." I held up a hand, cutting him off. "I know what you thought. But the truth is, I've realized that revenge isn't going to make me feel better. It's just going to leave me feeling empty." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "So what now?" I leaned forward, a spark of excitement in my eyes. "I want to propose something different. What if we put our heads together and create something amazing? Something that could change the game?" James's brow furrowed in confusion. "I'm not sure I follow." "Think about it," I said, my voice filled with enthusiasm. "You're a talented musician, and I'm a skilled architect. Together, we could create something truly unique, a fusion of music and design that's never been seen before. James's eyes widened as he began to grasp the scope of my idea. You mean, like a collaborative project? Combining our talents to create something groundbreaking? I nodded, a grin spreading across my face. Exactly. We could push the boundaries of what's possible. And create something that inspires people. And in the process, maybe we could even heal a little bit. James was silent for a moment, his expression thoughtful. Then, a smile spread across his face. I'm in, he said, his voice filled with excitement. Let's do this. As we shook hands, I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. I had chosen a different path, one that was filled with hope and possibility rather than anger and resentment. It was a risk, to be sure, but I knew in my heart that it was the right thing to do. As I walked back to my desk, I couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. I had taken control of my destiny, refusing to let the pain of the past define me. Instead, I was choosing to focus on the future, on the potential for growth and healing that lay ahead. And as I sat down at my computer, already sketching out ideas for our collaborative project, I knew that this was just the beginning. The journey ahead would be challenging, but with James by my side, I was ready to face whatever came our way. Together, we would create something amazing, something that would change the world. The days turned into weeks as James and I dove headfirst into our collaborative project, a unique fusion of architecture and music that we hoped would push the boundaries of both art forms. The excitement in the studio was palpable, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose coursing through me. This was no longer about revenge, it was about creation, innovation, and the joy of working together. We began brainstorming ideas, sketching out concepts that combined sound and structure in ways I had never imagined. Our discussions flowed effortlessly, each of us building upon the other's thoughts. James would describe the emotions he wanted to evoke through his music, and I would translate those feelings into architectural designs that could enhance the auditory experience. One afternoon, as we sat surrounded by sketches and musical scores, James leaned back in his chair, a thoughtful expression on his face. What if we created a space that changes with the music? A building that responds to sound. Almost like it's alive? I felt a thrill of excitement at the idea. That's brilliant. We could use materials that resonate with certain frequencies, allowing the structure to vibrate and transform with the music. It could be an immersive experience for everyone who enters. James's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm. Exactly. We could incorporate elements like kinetic sculptures that move in rhythm with the sound, creating a dynamic environment that evolves with each performance. As we continued to flesh out our ideas, I found myself lost in the creative process. The studio became my sanctuary, a place where I could escape the pain of the past and immerse myself in something beautiful. I felt a sense of joy that I hadn't experienced in a long time, a feeling that was amplified by the camaraderie I shared with James. We spent long hours in the studio, fueled by coffee and our shared passion. We collaborated with musicians and sound engineers, gathering insights and feedback to refine our vision. Each day brought new challenges, but we faced them together, supporting and encouraging one another. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow through the studio windows, we gathered with a small group of musicians to test our initial concepts. The air was thick with anticipation as we prepared for our first trial performance. James stood at the center of the room, guitar in hand, while I adjusted the lighting and sound equipment. "Are you ready for this?" he asked, a grin spreading across his face. "Absolutely," I replied, my heart racing with excitement. As he began to play, the music filled the room, enveloping us in a wave of sound. I watched in awe as the notes danced through the air, and I could feel the energy shift in the space around us. It was as if the walls were alive, responding to the melodies and harmonies that flowed from James's guitar. At that moment, I realized that we were creating something truly special. The music and architecture were intertwined, each enhancing the other in ways I had never thought possible. It was a beautiful symbiosis, a testament to the power of collaboration. As the performance continued, I felt a sense of fulfillment wash over me. This was what I had been searching for, a way to channel my pain into something meaningful, something that could inspire others. I was no longer defined by my past, I was building a future filled with creativity and connection. After the performance, the room erupted in applause. James beamed with pride, and I couldn't help but join in the celebration. We had taken our first steps toward realizing our vision, and it felt exhilarating. "Can you believe we did that?" James exclaimed, his eyes shining with excitement. I can't, I replied, still riding the high of the moment. But I know we're just getting started. There's so much more we can create together. As we began to discuss our next steps, I felt a sense of hope blossoming within me. The journey ahead would undoubtedly be filled with challenges, but I was ready to face them head on. With James by my side, I knew that we could achieve something remarkable. Together, we were exploring new horizons, breaking down barriers, and redefining what was possible. And in the process, I was rediscovering myself, my passion, my creativity, and my capacity for joy. The future was bright, and I was excited to see where this journey would take us. As the weeks turned into months, our collaborative project with James began to gain momentum and recognition within the creative community. The unique fusion of architecture and music we had envisioned was resonating with audiences, and we found ourselves in high demand for performances and installations. I poured my heart and soul into the project, channeling my energy into designing innovative spaces that enhanced the musical experience. Working alongside James was a constant source of inspiration, and I marveled at how our different skill sets complemented each other so seamlessly. One evening, as we were preparing for a major performance at a prestigious art gallery, I received an unexpected call from my former boss at the architecture firm. Michael, I've been following your work with James, and I have to say, I'm impressed, he said, his voice filled with admiration. How would you like to come back and lead a new project for us? I was stunned, my mind racing with a mix of emotions. This was the opportunity I had been waiting for, a chance to restore my career and reclaim my place in the industry. But it also meant stepping away from the collaborative project with James. At least temporarily. I'm flattered, really, I replied, choosing my words carefully. But I'm fully committed to this project with James. It's something I'm incredibly passionate about. There was a pause on the other end of the line. I understand, Michael, but this project could be a game changer for the firm. We're talking about a major commission that would put us on the map. And we need your vision to make it happen. I considered his words, weighing the potential impact on my career against the fulfillment I found in our collaborative work. In the end, the decision was clear. I appreciate the offer, but my heart is here, with James and this project. I hope you understand. As I hung up the phone, I felt a sense of pride wash over me. I had chosen to stay true to my passion, and to the creative vision we had built together. It was a risk, to be sure, but I knew in my heart that it was the right decision. In the weeks that followed, our project continued to gain momentum and critical acclaim. We were featured in design magazines and invited to speak at conferences. And I found myself basking in the respect and admiration of my peers. One evening, as we were celebrating the success of a particularly well-received performance, James turned to me with a grin. You know, Michael, I never thought I'd say this, but I'm glad you didn't take that job offer. This project wouldn't be the same without you. I smiled back, feeling a surge of gratitude. Me too, man. This has been the most rewarding experience of my career. And it's all thanks to you. James shook his head, his expression sincere. Nah, it's thanks to both of us. We make a pretty great team, don't we? I nodded, raising my glass in a toast to new horizons and the power of collaboration. As we clinked our glasses together, I felt a sense of contentment wash over me. I had come so far, from the depths of heartbreak and betrayal to the heights of creative fulfillment. And through it all, I found a true friend in James, someone who had helped me rediscover my passion and rebuild my career. As I looked around the room, surrounded by the people who had supported and believed in our vision, I knew that this was just the beginning. There were so many more stories to tell, so many more boundaries to push. And with James by my side, I was ready to take on whatever challenges lay ahead. The success of my collaboration with James had brought a renewed sense of purpose and joy into my life, but it also stirred up remnants of my past that I had thought were buried. Just when I felt I was finally moving forward, Emily re-entered the picture, and with her, the ghosts of our shared history. It started with a text message one evening, a simple "Can we talk?" That sent a jolt of anxiety through me. I hadn't heard from her in months, and the thought of facing her again filled me with a mix of dread and curiosity. Part of me wanted to know what she had to say, but another part of me was terrified of reopening old wounds. After much deliberation, I agreed to meet her at a cafe we used to frequent. As I walked through the familiar streets, memories flooded back, laughter, shared dreams, and the warmth of her presence. But with each step, I reminded myself of the betrayal that had shattered those memories. I was no longer the man I had been when we were together. I had grown, changed, and learned to embrace a new path. When I arrived at the cafe, I spotted Emily sitting at a corner table, her fingers nervously tracing the rim of her coffee cup. She looked different, more subdued, as if the weight of her choices had finally caught up with her. As I approached, I noticed the flicker of hope in her eyes, and for a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. "Michael," she said softly, her voice trembling as she stood to greet me. "Thank you for coming." I nodded, taking a seat across from her. "What's going on, Emily?" She took a deep breath, her eyes searching mine for understanding. "I've missed you. I know things ended badly, but I've had time to think. I want to make things right between us." Her words hung in the air, and I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. Part of me wanted to believe her, to return to the comfort of what we once had. But the other part of me, the part that had fought so hard to move on, screamed in protest. "Emily, you broke my trust," I said, my voice steady but firm. "You chose to be with someone else. You can't just expect me to forget that." Tears welled in her eyes as she leaned forward, desperation etched on her face. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I made a terrible mistake. But I've realized how much you mean to me. I want to rebuild what we had." I felt my heart ache for her, but I also felt a growing sense of clarity. The woman sitting across from me was not the same person I had once loved. The illusions I had held onto, the happy memories, the dreams of a future together, were crumbling before my eyes. I had spent so long trying to hold onto a version of her that no longer existed. "Emily," I said, my voice softer now, "I've changed. I'm not the same person I was when we were together, and I don't think you are either. I found a new path, a new purpose. I'm happy now, and I can't go back to the way things were." Her expression shifted from desperation to realization, and I could see the pain in her eyes as she understood the finality of my words. "You're serious, aren't you?" she whispered, her voice breaking. "I am," I replied, feeling a weight lift from my shoulders. "I need to let go of the past. I need to move forward without you." As I stood to leave, I felt a strange sense of liberation. I had faced the woman who had once held so much power over my heart, and I had chosen to walk away. It was a painful decision, but it was also a necessary one. I could no longer allow the shadows of my past to dictate my future. As I stepped out of the cafe, the cool air hit my face, invigorating me. I felt lighter, unburdened by the weight of old memories. I had shattered the illusions that had kept me tethered to a life that no longer served me. In the days that followed, I focused on my work with James and the exciting projects we had ahead. I poured my energy into creating, building, and exploring new horizons. I had finally severed the ties that had held me back, and I was ready to embrace the future with open arms. The journey of healing was far from over, but I knew I was on the right path. I had reclaimed my identity, my passion, and my sense of self-worth. And as I looked ahead, I felt a sense of hope and excitement for what was to come. With the weight of my past finally lifted, I felt a renewed sense of purpose as I stepped into the studio alongside James. The air was electric with creativity, and the possibilities ahead seemed endless. We were no longer just two artists collaborating on a project, we were partners united by a shared vision, ready to push boundaries and redefine what was possible. Our latest endeavor was ambitious, a multi-sensory installation that would combine architecture, music, and interactive elements to create an immersive experience for audiences. We envisioned a space where visitors could not only hear the music but also feel it resonate through the very walls, where sound and structure would dance together in harmony. As we brainstormed ideas, I felt a surge of inspiration coursing through me. The creative process was exhilarating, and I found myself fully engaged in every aspect of the project. We spent countless hours sketching designs, experimenting with materials, and collaborating with musicians and artists from various disciplines. Each day brought new challenges, but we faced them together, fueled by our passion and determination. One afternoon, as we were reviewing our plans, James turned to me with a grin. "You know, I can't believe how far we've come. It feels like we're on the brink of something truly special." I nodded, a smile spreading across my face. "It does. I never imagined I could find this kind of fulfillment again. Especially after everything that happened." James's expression turned serious. "I'm grateful for that. You've not only helped me grow as an artist, but you've also become a true friend. I don't take that lightly." His words struck a chord within me. I had come to the studio seeking revenge, but I had found so much more: friendship, collaboration, and a sense of belonging. Together, we were creating something that transcended our individual experiences, something that would leave a lasting impact on those who experienced it. As the installation began to take shape, we organized a preview event to showcase our work. The anticipation was palpable, and I could feel the excitement building within me. This was our moment to shine, to share our vision with the world. On the night of the event, the studio was transformed into a vibrant space filled with lights, music, and art. Guests mingled, their faces lit up with curiosity and wonder as they explored the installation. I watched as people interacted with the space, their reactions filled with awe and delight. As I stood beside James, taking in the scene, I felt a sense of pride swell within me. We had created something beautiful together, something that resonated with people on a deeper level. This was not just a project, it was a testament to our growth, our resilience, and our ability to overcome the challenges we had faced. When the performance began, I felt a rush of emotions. The music filled the air, and the installation came to life, responding to the rhythms and melodies in real time. It was a symphony of sound and structure, a celebration of creativity and collaboration. As the audience immersed themselves in the experience, I glanced over at James, who was lost in the moment, his eyes shining with passion. In that instant, I realized how far we had both come, how we had transformed our pain into something meaningful and beautiful. After the performance, the applause was deafening. Guests approached us, expressing their admiration and appreciation for our work. I felt a sense of validation wash over me, a confirmation that I had chosen the right path. Amid the celebration, I took a moment to reflect on my journey. I had faced heartbreak, betrayal, and loss, but I had emerged stronger and more resilient. I had rediscovered my passion for architecture, forged a meaningful friendship with James, and created something that would leave a lasting impact. As I looked toward the future, I felt a sense of hope and excitement. The road ahead was filled with possibilities, and I was ready to embrace them. Together with James, I knew we could continue to create, innovate, and inspire. I had found my place in the world again, and it was a place filled with dreams, creativity, and the promise of new beginnings. The journey was far from over, but I was ready to face whatever lay ahead, armed with the knowledge that I had the power to shape my destiny.